Hello and good morning everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. So this webinar is going to be focusing on Mimecast's acquisition of Ataata, which is a security awareness training and cyber risk management platform. And presenting the webinar, we have Nick Riley here from Mimecast.
Thanks for that, Amy. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Just quickly share the correct window for you guys as well, and we can kick this off. So really quickly, just a bit of background on the Ataata acquisition. I guess for those of you who are our Mimecast customers, I know we have some customers on the line. One of the things that we've been trying to help organisations with over the sort of the last couple of years, outside of our TCP bundle, so outside of being a technology player and helping with the technology side, is to try and lean into that side of things where we're empowering end users to really be front and center of that risk profile and the security landscape, because ultimately it doesn't matter what technology you put in place, there's still that human factor around anything, and end users can make mistakes or can look for workarounds, and actually quite a lot of the time they don't realize that they're doing something wrong. They think that they're just doing their job to the best of their ability, and that's when a lot of these mistakes happen. And over time, you know, as that TCP bundle has fleshed out for us as an organization, we have seen that more and more, that our customers do still succumb to data breaches from the human error standpoint. So we wanted to be able to bring to market something that looked to address that problem for organizations, but also looks at it in a slightly different way. And the reason that Ataata was so attractive to us is because whilst it is a training platform for your end users, it's also a risk analysis platform for the security team. And that's really important, because actually currently a lot of platforms that you see in terms of the training space aren't giving organizations an understanding of where that risk sits. And actually, if you can't measure risk over time, it's really hard to justify whether that training platform's working. And fundamentally, just seeing how people answer questions probably doesn't give you an insight to how risky they are as end users. So that's why it was Ataata. But 91% of attacks start with email, right? So actually, if you've got all of the technology in place, why do we need to train end users? And the reason is that actually, whilst, yeah, most attacks do start with an email, that's not how data breaches happen. Generally speaking, data breaches happen from negligent employees. So much so that actually in the most recent ICO quarterly report, 80% of security incidents that were reported were down to human error and process failures. And that's a staggering amount. And it's not just people doing things in a technology space where they do things wrong as well. The number one reason for a data breach last quarter was people losing paperwork. And also in the top 5 were people losing laptops or losing mobile phones. These fundamental problems that are outside the realms of technology help. And the fact that actually we need to get to a point with people where they put data security front and center of their mind in all of their actions. And it goes beyond people making mistakes, because actually, if a quarter of people are leaving laptops unlocked at their desk at the end of the day, that's a huge issue. For an ISO 27001 accredited organization, you lose your accreditation. For an organization like Mimecast, we couldn't afford to do that. But a quarter of end users say that they leave their laptops unlocked at the end of the day. And people know they should lock their laptops. So actually what we can take is that fundamentally people know the right actions to take, but they don't take them because they don't understand the implication of not doing them. So how do you get to the point where a platform is engaging people to not make mistakes, but then giving end users an understanding of, if they do make mistakes, what the implication of that is? Because only with those two things hand in hand will you ever get to a point where people start to care and start to believe that actually their actions do matter. But what we can fundamentally take from those stats is actually that traditional methods probably aren't working. That's a pretty broad statement. So to narrow it down, from the customers that I've spoken to over the last couple of months, we can break it down, as I say, into 3 distinct areas that things aren't working. The first one is, being totally honest, a lot of security awareness training is very, very boring. And actually it's questionable whether some of it's even training to start off with. And I think everyone here will have seen sort of the compliance-based tick box exercise. Can you please download this PDF? Can you tick the box? Can you forward it to HR or to the security team? They'll file it for us for a year, and then we'll go through the same exercise next year. So people aren't reading that 4 or 5 page PDF. They're scrolling to the end, they're ticking the box, and they're just moving on with their day at work. Another way that we've seen people sort of lose engagement with their training is that actually they aren't being measured. And whilst that may not seem like a massive problem for organizations, actually when people aren't being measured, they're not taking the training seriously. And a really good indication of that actually is Mimecast's historic training. And what that used to look like was every quarter to every 6 months, we'd receive a 20-minute video. That video would then lead us to a PowerPoint presentation, so a 5 to 10 page PowerPoint presentation. And then that would lead us to some multiple choice questions. And what we realized as a sales team, as a go-to-market team over time, was actually that it didn't matter how many times we got those questions wrong, as long as we got them right eventually. So that led to us not doing the things that we knew we should do, not watching the videos, not taking away any learning moments, and actually fundamentally just answering those questions, giving them 3 or 4 attempts, and then moving on to the next bit of our day. So it's really key that if people aren't being measured, they will ignore the training that you're giving just to game that system and move on. And the last reason, which is probably come around a bit more recently, is we've started to lead with the test rather than lead with the training. A really good example of that is standalone phish testing. So we've got to a point with phish testing where now we test all of our end users when they perceive that they've received no training on a subject, and then we force them to take training after that. And if you think about how we've learned while we've been at school or college or university, it's the total opposite. We're given that information up front in a format that we understand, and then we're tested on its second to that. So now, and how in a corporate world we've changed that on its head and led with that test has generally led to sort of resentment towards that training. So we're not actually in a culture of learning. We're in a culture of trying to scare people into doing the right thing. And when you sort of lead with that scaring tactic, what you'll find is that will work for a certain amount of time, but actually give that sort of 6 months, and people start to, as I said before, be resentful towards that. And that's not where you want to be, because if people are resentful towards the training that you're delivering, they're never going to take it on board. And so what I found with the companies that I've spoken to is generally things like this are happening. So people aren't engaged with the training that we're delivering. The fact that they're not engaged means that they have a lack of knowledge around security awareness topics. That lack of knowledge means that actually when it leads to us putting them into a position where they could make a mistake, they often do. That mistake then means that they are forced to take training. So they have a bad attitude around that training that you're then forcing them to take after the fact. The fact that they then have bad attitude to that means that they're not engaged with that training. So this becomes a downward spiral, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And the only way to change this is to start to give your end users training that they can engage with. And I think to sort of define engagement is, we're not talking about stuff that people love every time. We're talking about training that people will talk about and will understand. Because if we start to talk about these topics, our retention rates go from sort of 20% if we just watch a video to 70% because we start to talk about these things. So how do we give people content that they'll talk about over a coffee, and whether they say, oh, don't you think that video was funny, or don't you think that was ridiculous, or don't you think it was rubbish? It doesn't matter what their thoughts are on it, as long as they're talking about it, because then they'll start to retain that message. And that's the sort of content that we believe end users need to be fed with to really change that culture. But it's not all about the training. We need to understand risk, as I mentioned at the beginning. And it's really important to understand risk, because every organization has people who are high risk. And it might not be 1 in 8. In fact, it probably isn't 1 in 8. But it might be 1 in 80, or it might be 1 in 800. But organizations generally don't know what their 1 in is. And they only have any way of finding that reactively. So they wait for people to make a mistake before they realize they're high risk. And that's a really bad place to be in, because if you're waiting for end users to have a data breach before you realize they're high risk employees, it's potentially too late to solve the problem. So we're helping organizations understand that risk profile before a breach happens. And how do we do that? Because it's hard. It's a very difficult thing to do, especially as a standalone organization. So what we measure for you is engagement. So we look at how engaged are your end users with the training. Do they take it after an hour? Do they take it after a day, a week, a month? And also, do we need to chase them, or do they take it off their own back? So we can have automated chasers, or do they take it of their own volition? We look at their knowledge base. So when we quiz them after that training, do they get those questions right? And if they do get the questions right, we give them a tick in the box, and if they don't, we mark against. But then we also look at, if we deliver phish testing after we've trained, because we can deliver phish testing out of our platform, how do they interact with that phish test? So are they clicking on a link? Are they opening it and ignoring it? Are they reporting it as phishing? And then we look at sentiment. And for me, this is the most important thing to track, because we're tracking end users' attitude to risk. Because actually, if you don't understand someone's attitude, you don't understand the kinds of decisions they're going to make. Because somebody could be fully engaged with the training. Somebody could always get their questions right. But if they have a really laid back, laissez-faire attitude to risk, they're always going to make questionable decisions when they're actually put in a real life scenario. And that probably harks back to not turning your laptop off at the end of the day, because people don't realize that you need to lock things down, because they're laid back when it comes to risk. Whereas, you know, people may get questions wrong, but they're probably the end users that are locking their laptop down. So it's really important one. It's an intangible for most people to measure. So that's why it's really important that we can measure that for you, and how it changes over time. And then a lot of organizations would be able to look at those three things probably in a roundabout way, and then do a comparison internally. But what we do is then give you a comparison of that across normalized data on the whole platform. So we're giving you an understanding of your end users' risk profile against hundreds of thousands of other users, because that becomes much more statistically relevant if we can say this person is high risk compared to hundreds of thousands of others, versus if you do this on your own, this person is high risk versus 500, 1,000, 2,000 others. So we're giving you that really data rich side to this as well. So we give a data-driven risk profiles that are based off of sentiment, knowledge, engagement, peer comparison, and industry comparison. And as I said, we're then pushing that against our normalized data from our proprietary data pool to give companies an employee risk score and a company risk score. And it's actually really important that you have both of those things, because if you only have one or the other, it becomes inactionable data. And what I mean by that is, if you only have your company risk score and you don't understand who your high risk employees are, how do you ever change that company risk score? Outside of taking everybody offline, all end users offline, and giving them all training, which we've just discussed doesn't really work. So there's no way to change that. And on the converse of that, if you have an employee risk score, but you don't understand outwardly where your company sits, you don't actually know how good or bad those employees are, because there's nothing to compare them out against in the real world. So it's so important that you have both of those bits of information. Otherwise, as I say, it becomes that inactionable data. So normally, having a customer testimonial isn't something that I would do within a presentation, but I really like what this is speaking to. It leads me into the end user understanding of the platform pretty well. We're trying to help people engage their workforce in security topics so that they understand that every action they take and every time they touch data, there is a potential data breach that can happen. And it's only when all of your end users understand fundamentally that they can cause a data breach at any time, when you start to see that culture change and people put data security front and center of their mind. And we've done that by giving people content that on the whole they like, because generally that hasn't been done before. So our modules are all very short, because you don't want to have to take users offline for a long period of time every month. So 5 minutes a month. They're all based on American sitcom. The reason being, American sitcom is the most watched TV on earth. We have ongoing characters, so people don't need to learn the characters every month. And the premise is that you have the angel and a devil on the shoulder of the main protagonist. So the angel's played by sound judgment, the devil's played by human error. And it's how those two characters get that protagonist to interact with the situation that they're faced with. And it's really important people realize that these breaches can happen anywhere. So it's not just office-based. There are videos that are set in a taxi, videos in a coffee shop, in a gym, in a pub, because you want your end users to know that this isn't just something that can happen to them in their business life. This could also happen in their personal life. So we're reinforcing that message, reinforcing data security at all times, because only when people realize, as I said before, only when people realize that these things happen at any time, people are always on the lookout for how they can get access to data, or people are constantly fast-fingered when they do things and sending stuff to the wrong people, or, as I said, leaving paperwork in the wrong place. These things can happen anywhere, and they can happen in your personal life. So that's the message that we're trying to reinforce. I know for myself as well, when it comes to how do we consume data, or consume information, sorry, we consume information via video now. When I had to learn to tie a bow tie, I watched a YouTube clip 3 to 5 minutes long, rather than reading about how to tie a bow tie. So we're giving people information in the way they're used to consuming it.
Hi there. It's time to forget everything you know about security awareness training. Security topics may be heavy, but the way we learn about them doesn't have to be. Every month, Ataata users receive a new video. The content is fast-paced and funny, and, oh, I don't know, here's a new concept. People actually pay attention. Quick example, ransomware.
Congratulations, you won a Caribbean cruise for 2. I won?
That's awesome.
No, Doug, nobody won.
Why would you squash his dreams like that?
Because that's not real.
There's a picture of a real boat. All you gotta do is click on the link for more information. Ship's finally come in, bud. Doug sailing away. Click it.
Do not click on that link. You don't know who sent it to you. Don't take the
No,
bait.
click it, Doug.
Be strong, Doug. Doesn't even look like that great of a boat anyway.
That's not even a real site.
Well, Doug learned his lesson the hard way. Ataata users have it easier. The single question that pops up after each video was purposely crafted to reinforce that month's main takeaway. Get the question right, and we'll celebrate with you. Answer wrong, and we will let you know it. Okay, next step, peer comparison. People like to know how they stack up, and Ataata gets another chance to highlight the best course of action. After employees find out how they did compared to their coworkers, they get a badge in one of 5 categories. That's it. Click, watch, laugh, learn. They're done. How easy is that? The platform is universal, which means employees can experience Ataata whenever they want from any device. And the whole process takes about 3 minutes each month. Seriously simple.
And what I'll move on to next is what the dashboard looks like, so what the administration console looks like. So here's an overview of a dashboard for an organization. What we're giving you the ability to see are module completion rates, so how many people have completed the modules that you've sent out, what the correct response rate is across those modules. We're showing you completion rates by department, and then quite importantly, we show you how your organization is doing versus other organizations that don't take the training. So we're giving you an understanding of where your end users sit once they have watched those videos versus people who haven't watched the videos. And that's really important because it's good to see how the training is affecting your organization, and over time you'd expect this to become better and people to have a much better than average response rate. In terms of looking at distinct modules, you can also do that. So you might want to just look at a specific module and cross-reference how you're doing against your industry or your peers. And these are all the modules for across the year. And if you were to look at a module that hasn't gone out yet, there's a little bit more that you can do. So you can change the date that that's going to go out. You can customize the email. So we deliver all of this training via email. Or if there is a requirement to, we can also integrate with an LMS so that people can do the training through an LMS. You can also upload additional content, and that's quite important for a lot of people. The reason being that whilst we're saying we need to move away from this compliance-based training model, you understand that there is a compliance requirement to have those tick boxes completed. So what you can do is upload the custom content. It's PDF drag and drop. Just drop it into there. And then once your end users have watched the video and answered the question, they'd be confronted with that piece of custom content and asked to acknowledge that they've read it or not acknowledge that they've read it. So again, designed to be very easy, lightweight. You'd only have to log into here when you wanted to see those reports as and when they happen. Forced out there. Bear with me 1 second as I log back in. So the next thing that I'm going to show everyone is sort of the rolling out of Ataata. It's designed to be very, very lightweight for organizations. The reason being that actually people don't have time to log in and administer these things on an ongoing basis. You want to just be able to sort of set it up at the beginning of the year and really forget about it, let it run, and just, as I say, log in to see those reports or download those reports to share with the organization. We have a recommended cadence of 14 modules in year 1. Of course, people don't have to take those. We can set those up for you, and if you change your mind at a later date, it's just drag and drop to change the date that things are in. So very, very easy, straightforward to administer. In terms of phishing, we have some pre-built templates that can use, or you can create your own templates, or you can edit ours as well. So if ours are kind of what you're looking for, but you actually want to change some of the wording in it, you can do that too. In terms of the campaigns, we monitor all of the campaigns that you've sent. We show you who's opened an email and who's clicked on the links, but we also cross-reference who's clicked on the links and how many training modules they've had, because actually that empowers security teams to have much more of a rounded conversation with people. Because if you can say to your end users, actually, we've tried to train you on phishing, you've received 2 training modules, you've not taken them because the boxes are empty, and we've sent 6 phish tests and you've clicked on 4 of those tests internally, it empowers you to have a much more adult conversation, because you can show that you're leading with that training that's being ignored and that people are still doing the wrong actions. So you can see how that's fairly comprehensive. In terms of setting up a campaign though, it's designed again to be very, very easy and lightweight. Something that you can do off of the back of your setup at the beginning of the year. So you may know that you're going to use 3 of our modules on phishing. You know the dates that you're going to use them, and it allows you to reinforce the message rather than lead with the test. So if you know your first one's going to go out on the 1st of January, for example, all you have to do to create a campaign is name. Do you want random templates, or do you want everyone to receive the same phish test? What language? So we have it, as I said, in 14 languages. Which templates? So you can choose multiple templates to send to users. What group of users do you want it to go to? So do you want it to go to all users, or do you want to build a predefined list? What date do you want it to go out on? So you know that training module is going out on the 1st of January. You can build this to go out on the 14th of January. What from email template do you want it to come from? And what time zone do you want it to go out in? And then you're done in terms of that phish test. So you can see how at the beginning of the year you could build up, you know, maybe 6 of these, 1 every other month for your end users, very, very quickly and easily, and again not have to put that lag onto the IT team to build out campaigns on an ongoing basis. And then the last thing to show in the platform is the reporting on your users specifically. So what we can show you in here is basically what I like to define as this is the carrot and stick area. In terms of stick, we have watch list. So these are the people that haven't taken the training after 4 weeks. This can be drilled down by department and exported. And we can also show you who has taken the training. So we'll show you how many they've watched versus how many correct responses and incorrect responses. Again, you can drill that down by department and export it. And it just gives you the ability to offload that onto heads of or onto line managers to chase their own employees rather than making it something that the IT and security team needs to do. And then the final thing that I have to show you is your risk score. Again, we can do this at an end user level or as an organization level. And what we're looking at is These relate to sort of the bell curve on the platform itself, with the very poor being in the bottom 2% and the excellent being in the top 2% across the entire platform. And again, you can use this to really work with that carrot or stick model. So whilst these people may have to have, you know, some classroom training taken offline to do something to bolster that that understanding for them, these guys maybe at the end of every quarter you start to gamify this and you say, actually, anyone who's in the excellent bracket gets a bottle of champagne, or, you know, gets to go home an hour early on a Friday and go to the pub, or whatever that is. But what you'll see by trying to reinforce the positive message, you'll see people move towards that. And when people move towards a positive, that's generally a long-term change. Whereas people moving away from negative, that's short-term, because actually as soon as you stop that bad message for bad behavior, people will fall back into that. So it's really important to be able to do that. Whilst the stick is important, it's very important to be given the information to go with carrot as well. And again, as you'd expect, this can be drilled down by department and exported as well. And then we also give you an understanding of how that is changing over time for the organization. So the higher the bar, the higher the risk score. If you think of a risk score like a credit score, high is good. And so we're showing you you're becoming statistically less risky over time. So again, it's another ROI exercise to see how the platform's impacting behavior over time. And we also break that down into a number on your dashboard. So you'd see this change over time as well. In terms of the platform, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So Amy, I don't know if you want to take back over. I know you've got a holding screen to go to, and we can sort of broach those questions.
Brilliant, thanks, Nick. So yes, so if you do have any questions, there is a questions box just at the right hand side of your screen. If you just write them in there, then I will read those out. I think we've had a couple come through already. So there's some here from David. He said, can we design or upload our own training?
So no, currently the training that is in the platform is designed to be the same for everyone. And the reason for that is if we don't have everyone taking exactly the same training, it's really hard for us to baseline that risk profile, because people will be taking different things and answering different questions. So what we're going to do to counter that over the sort of the next 6 months, so in the next iteration of the platform, is we're going to, as part of that custom content that I spoke about, we're going to give organizations the ability to upload a further 3 questions that they'll then be able to report on.
Okay, great, thank you. The other question from David, he said, company versus industry, can we opt out of that? I don't want my company statistics in the public domain.
So that company versus industry is people not taking the training. So if you were on the platform, we wouldn't be showing how you as an organization are doing. We're showing you how people who haven't taken those training modules are answering the questions. So your data wouldn't be in there. It's just people who aren't on the platform. So every time we release new modules, so we release 12 new modules a year, we ask those questions and those modules to thousands of end users across various ways. So whether it's to win a prize at a trade show, or a myriad of ways that you can ask people these questions to get an understanding of what the average correct response rate is, and then that's the baseline that we're giving you to feedback off of. So you're seeing how your organization is doing once they have taken the training versus people who haven't taken the training.
Okay, great. And one question here from Arpan. He said, can we send a phishing campaign at a random time, language, and user group?
Yeah, so you can use that fish testing included in the platform. Is you can use as much as you wanted to. You can send one a day if you wanted to. You can send it to all users, or you can build a predefined group and send it to just the group. So I know I've got some organizations that are looking at how they can just send those tests. They'll send a test to everyone who so they'll start off with everyone, but then what they'll do is just start to send it to people who failed the tests to try and drive the correct behavior from the people who keep constantly failing. So that is something that you can do, yeah, predefine those users.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, we'll just wait to see if any more questions come through. So as mentioned before, there is a little questions box just at the right hand side. So if you do have any, just type those in there. Obviously, we've got our email on the screen. If you do want to submit any outside of the webinar, you can send us an email there. Okay, so Felix has said, would this be a bundle within Mimecast?
So yeah, good question. It is. So it's a full Mimecast product now. So you can buy it as part of an ongoing Mimecast agreement. If you did sign up, it'd be prorated to your existing contract. But you can also buy it standalone, so it can be a standalone service. Currently, it doesn't sit within the Mimecast stack, so that's quite important. But the plan is to migrate that over within over the next 6 to 12 months.
Okay, thanks, Nick. And Davis also said about one of the drawbacks of phishing campaigns, saying that they just aren't realistic or testing, and they're generally too easy to spot.
Yeah, and I would totally agree. So that's why we don't recommend leading with phishing. We do have it as part of the platform because we think it does have a use case. However, where this platform's going, and if you imagine sort of the information that Mimecast has, if you use it as an email security gateway, and we can start to build in the analysis of how end users are interacting with real live phishing emails. So with TTP, we're rewriting those URLs. We can see if people click on those URLs. So you can imagine over time how that can feed into a user's risk score using live data, using real data, rather than using standalone testing.
Okay, thank you, Nick. So I think it looks like that's all the questions that we have today. So thank you everyone for joining the webinar today. I hope you found that useful, and thank you also, Nick, for presenting the webinar. As mentioned at the beginning, there is a critique form at the end of the webinar, so if you could please fill that out, that'd be great. Oh, actually, sorry, we just have one more come through. Is there a free trial available or coming soon?
So we don't have a free trial per se. What we can do is send out links to videos so that you can have end users see the videos. We can also do like a read-only version of the dashboard itself. Generally, the reason that we don't do sort of proof of concepts is because it's really hard for anyone to take away anything out of the platform itself over sort of a 2-week period, because what we're talking about is changing culture and the risk analysis, and actually we need to sort of have 3 months of people using that to give you sort of worthwhile data there. But yeah, what we can do is have as I say, a read-only access set up. We can definitely share examples of what the reporting looks like, and as I said just briefly, we can also share links to those videos so that you can see the full end user experience and share those internally as well.
Thanks, Nick. Okay, so yeah, I think that's the end of the questions now. So yeah, so as mentioned, thanks everyone for joining. Thank you, Nick, for presenting. I'll send you all a link to the recording either this afternoon or tomorrow morning. And if you could fill out the feedback form, that'd be really great, really helpful for us. So thank you, everyone. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of your day today. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.